It's finally happened. The takeover of Newcastle United by the Saudi Arabia financed consortium. I'm with the Athletic's George Caulkin for some quick reaction. George, how'd you feel?
Knackered, to be honest, Matt. I mean, it's been a very, very busy 24 hours, incredibly hectic. Sort of come from the blue. The irony, really, of it is after sort of all this time. But you know, we're talking about 18 months of this grinding away in the background, as you know perfectly well, writing about it, and really longer than that. I mean, we've just gone past the 4-year anniversary of Amanda Staveley going to her first match at St James's Park and deciding that Newcastle were the club for her. And you know, those bids fell through, as we know, and now she's come back. I mean, I think it's the day that Newcastle fans thought wouldn't ever happen, but Mike Ashley has gone after 14 controversial, difficult, painful, corrosive, toxic years, and they're now facing something much, very, very different and controversial for different reasons.
Well, yes, we're going to get into a little bit of that, and I look, I'm not going to leave it all for you to do, George.
Thank you.
That would be unfair. But look, come on, let's talk a little bit about that fan reaction and what this means for people in Newcastle. Dare I say the wider area? I think there are probably parts of Newcastle that couldn't give a monkeys, but you know, this clearly is a regional story.
Yeah,
you go on. I mean, you know the region.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the first important thing to say is that it is the end of something. And you know, if you're a 20-year-old Newcastle fan, for example, pretty much the only thing you've ever known is Mike Ashley's ownership of the club. And we're talking about 2 relegations. We're talking about this sort of institutionalized failure, this lack of hope and ambition. Of course, all the controversial decisions that have kind of happened along the way, the renaming of the stadium, the treatment meted out to people like Alan Shearer and Kevin Keegan, all those kind of nicks to prestige and the club's kind of well-being, and leaving it really, in the words of Alan Shearer, our columnist, an empty and hollow shell. And so I do think, and you know, they're second bottom of the table at the moment. They've not won a game all season. They've been playing some of the worst, the worst football I can remember for the last couple of years. So I do think it's important that Newcastle fans get a chance to say goodbye to something and good riddance to something. But of course, the big question is what comes next. And you know, we're talking about the involvement of Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. I know you'll have a lot to say about this, but theoretically, that makes Newcastle arguably the wealthiest club in the world. And so it's a transformative takeover. Now, there's a lot of baggage that comes with that, but and that's probably a very, you know, that's underplaying it probably to an unforgivable degree, but I'm sure we'll talk about that too. But it's a transformative takeover. It offers the chance to lift them up, you know, to lift them up the table. There is the promise of investment in the city and in the region, and in a club that has been starved of it, and that is crying out for, crying out for updates to infrastructure and so on, and that needs a bit of TLC, quite frankly.
Well, let's unpack some of that baggage, right? So we've talked about them a few times. We've mentioned them. Public Investment Fund. They're a big sovereign wealth fund, about 50 years old. For the first 20, 30 years, they were very inward looking. They basically spent Saudi's fossil fuel income on very Saudi projects. But for the same reason that Norway has a sovereign wealth fund, that Qatar, Abu Dhabi, UAE, they all have sovereign wealth funds. It's about diversifying the income, because you know that we are eventually going to stop putting diesel and petrol in our cars and relying on gas boilers. At some point, we are going to get away from that. So they've got to diversify their economies. They have other issues as well, sort of social issues. You know, people in Saudi Arabia, you know, they're worried about the same stuff that we are. They want to create new jobs. They want people to live fit and active lives. All sorts of good stuff, right? So that is what PIF have increasingly started to do. And quite aggressively in the last 10, 15 years, they have become a very, very active sovereign wealth fund. And they've taken stakes in things like Uber and Live Nation and they have gone after big entertainment brands. They are making big external investments now. And I think the reason that we can no longer pussyfoot around the controversy is they've basically become the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's clearing fund for his strategic vision for where he sees Saudi Arabia going. And for a long time, that was very favorably not for a long time, for a period, it was favorably looked upon by the West, that here was this young, seemingly reforming figure who was going to, as I said, diversify the economy, but bring Saudi Arabia, well, I was going to say the 21st century, the latter bit of the 20th century. We were going to let women drive. We were going to perhaps behead fewer people, and we were just going to basically behave like good partners in the region. Now, recently, some of those things haven't gone so well. Saudi Arabia's got involved in a brutal civil war in Yemen, massively fell out with its neighbor, Qatar, which is very significant to this story, and has cracked down on dissidents. We are a sports podcast. This is a business of sport podcast. I urge people to do their own research on that.
Yeah.
Okay. But from a business of sport point of view, from a football takeover point of view, the Public Investment Fund has significant baggage. Now, from a Premier League angle, as part of its falling out with Qatar, which started 4 and a bit years ago, Saudi Arabia went after Qatari assets to weaken and hurt Qatar. It was a falling out. And one of the key assets they went after was beIN Sports, a long-term Premier League broadcast partner, one of the biggest broadcasters in the world, certainly in North Africa and the Middle East. And they basically, to cut a long story short, stole beIN's feed for the best part of, 3 and a bit years. And for a long time, the Premier League knew this and backed its broadcast partner, as it always does, for commercial reasons. And for a long time, Mike Ashley would have sat in meetings and gone, yeah, that's exactly what we do. We go after people with dodgy feeds in pubs in Portsmouth, and we go after people that steal our stuff in Saudi Arabia. Go for it. Now we get to the beginning of this year, and the Saudi state, who had been ignoring Premier League demands, requests, and then the NFLs and the British governments and everybody else, because they'd just been ignoring this stuff because it was part of this fraternal row with Qatar, and that was their priority at that time. Now they want to join the club. And it's ever since then that piracy issue, that local issue, that squabble has been Newcastle's problem. Get to today. Well, we get to yesterday. We're doing this on Thursday. Yesterday lunchtime, all of beIN's Christmases came true at once. Okay? It found out that it was no longer banned in Saudi Arabia, that its biggest single market, where it hasn't been able to legally broadcast, it now can. Now, the thawing had started already, but yesterday was the key day. Furthermore, Saudi Arabia has promised to cooperate on tackling piracy. So if beIN has a problem, it will say to the Saudi authorities, by the way, can you shut down that dodgy feed? Saudi said it will. It has also said that it's going to settle the various disputes that Qatar has started, the arbitration cases that have started against Saudi Arabia. There's a big one involving Qatar Airways. There's another one involving the citizens that got stuck in when they closed the borders. And there's one involving beIN, $1 billion arbitration case. They're all going away. Peace has resumed in the area. And miraculously, what happens 24 hours later? Newcastle fans get their deal. Now, George, you've lived this.
Well, so have you, yeah, and so are you.
Well, I've lived bits of it, but I think you've felt it. You've felt it. I haven't felt it. I've just watched it.
No, too right. But you've been on top of the, that side of the story. I mean, and I'm pleased you have because it's so far away from what I would consider, my day-to-day job. And you've touched on all those things, and I care deeply about human rights. It's something that there's something I feel kind of very passionately about, but Newcastle fans have kind of found themselves having to answer questions about these subjects, and obviously it's incredibly complicated. It's contentious. It's difficult. It's heartrending, some of it. But a lot of them, it's also so difficult to sort of unpick. I mean, you talked about the Premier League, the owners and directors test, for example. I mean, those things aren't part of it. The human rights issues aren't part of it, or not. No. I mean, do I think they should be? Yes, I do. Actually, I do. But according to the rules that are there at the moment, Newcastle have gone through. And to people who say that this is a line in the sand, I totally get that, and I feel that as well. But there've been plenty of other lines in the sands in the Premier League over the last kind of couple of decades, whether it's Russian involvement, whether it's Chinese involvement, whether it's Americans using a club's own money to buy a club, etc., etc., etc. And in many ways, is this the worst of a bad lot? Yeah, it is, but it's the rules. It's the rules of the Premier League, and I kind of feel desperately sorry for Newcastle fans that they're sort of having to become spokespeople for a regime that they've had no say in, whether takes over their club or not. Sorry, I'm getting a bit garbled there, but they've had no say. They've had no say in this decision. Yes, a vast majority support it, but they've had no say in this. They're the people who haven't had a choice in it. They've seen their club get transferred from one billionaire to a lot of to richer billionaires, but without being able to do anything about it.
Look, we've been talking for 10 minutes, and we could talk for 1,000 minutes.
I'm sure we will.
I think you will be on other podcasts. It's already starting to pour out in pieces. I urge you lot to go read them. We really have scratched the surface here. This is the most remarkable takeover I have ever covered. Unquestionably. Remarkable. My gob is smacked. Well done, George. I think this is the beginning, actually.
Oh, I think so, yes.
I really
so. Yeah,
I really
think
do.
so.